Hey guys, welcome back to an episode of the Jay Sit Down podcast. I am your host, Jaden, and today we're going to be recapping the Rose Bowl and Sugar Bowl games that took place last night, Monday, January 1st, 2024. Hope you guys had a great new year. Welcome to 2024. We made it, guys. We also made it to college football playoffs officially, which kicked off last night, like I mentioned before, with Michigan defeating Alabama in overtime 27-20 in the Rose Bowl. And Washington defeating Texas 37-31 in the Sugar Bowl. So those two teams, Michigan and Washington, will face each other in the national championship game next Monday, January 8th, down in Houston, Texas. Yeah, we'll preview that. But before that, we'll talk about just, like I said, recapping the two games that took place here last night. And so we'll get into that. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, like us, like us, share, comment your thoughts, your predictions for the national championship game, your thoughts on how both ball games ended last night. The play call that Alabama made with Jalen Milroe down, in the red zone with the QB run. I mean, a lot of divisiveness there on whether they should have called that play or not. So let me know what you guys think about that in the comment section. So yeah, like I said, you got Alabama. They beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, and they ended up being picked over FSU, who was undefeated on the year, ACC champs, to get into the college football playoff at the last spot at number 4. And then, of course, Texas got in, and Michigan and Washington, right? So, of course, now Alabama will go and play Michigan in the Rose Bowl at Rose Bowl Stadium and out there in Pasadena, California. So, leading up to that week, or the week leading up to the game, of course, Alabama, they're getting ready. Nick Saban's had a month to prepare. Jim Harbaugh's had a month to prepare. You got all the news about, Alabama, they shouldn't even been in the playoff. And Nick Saban was just kind of like, hey, you know what? We're here, so we have to take care of business. It's going to be a dogfight against this team. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a challenge. And we have to play how we've been playing, to end the year out and all that kind of stuff, which they really didn't do to start off the game. I mean, now, ironically, though, at the same time, defensively, they were doing well against J.J. McCarthy and the Wolverines. Caleb Downs, who was a freshman out of Georgia, out of the state of Georgia here, had a pick against J.J. McCarthy, but it was wiped off because he was out of bounds. His feet were not in bounds, so Michigan would live to fight Notre Dame, but eventually they would get the ball back to Alabama on punt, and Alabama will go and score with Chase McClellan running it in as they moved down towards near the red zone. He took about 30 yards or so in for the touchdown. Alabama leads 7-0. So yeah, decent looking drive. Alabama was struggling with their offense early. A lot of the offensive line was getting up a lot of sacks. They gave up like 5 or 6 sacks in this game, which would be a theme. The Michigan pressure was just getting to be too much for the O-line. Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler, who were on the broadcast, they were talking about how they just, they were throwing so many different looks at the Alabama offensive line and Jalen Milroe to the point where early on they just couldn't figure it out, and the pressure got to be too much, and they were just getting 3 and outs, punting the ball. And the interesting thing about it was the punter, James Burnip, who he had a great game because the field position game was very important, played a role here for Alabama. Even though they didn't win, it was playing a role for them, pinning Michigan back deep, pinning them back deep so they wouldn't have to, so they would have to drive along the field because their offense just couldn't work. There were low snaps, guys missing blocks. It was more so Michigan just really just out physicaling. I don't know if that's even a word. Being more physical. How about that? Being more physical than the Bama O line up front, and just winning that battle in the trenches, which we talked about. It's going to be very important. Who can establish the line of scrimmage, who can be more physical, who can run the football, who can push guys off of the ball. Just that type of stuff. And early on, it was Michigan that was doing all of that, and Alabama couldn't do it. So that's just really how the game went along. The offense would get going in the second half a little bit, but other than that, they just couldn't do anything. And Michigan, Blake Corum, had a great game. Roman Wilson made some good catches early, and then he kind of broke out a little bit later. Had like the potentially the game sealing touchdown for the most part there. And yeah, I mean, as a Bama fan, it hurt to watch this, but I knew that this team wasn't a national championship team this year. Of course, when they made it in, I was like, yeah, I'm going to root for them. I want them to go and win it. But I knew that the talent just wasn't there this year. Jalen Milroe, as talented as he is, he's a very athletic quarterback. He just isn't as polished as quarterbacks that Alabama has had in the past. Tua Tagovailoa, Bryce Young, Mac Jones. You can go back and say AJ McCarron, Jay Coker, those guys like Jalen Hurts. I mean, you know, he just isn't one of those players. He's not that type of quarterback. He's got an arm. He can throw the football down the field. He's not really that accurate, and his quarterback awareness, his internal clock. You hear that all the time, especially in the pros when they talk about a quarterback's internal clock. They have to know when to get rid of the football, when to get it out, when to escape the pocket, when to see when to just throw it in the dirt, whatever they have to do to just avoid the sack, avoid the loss of yards, live to fight another down. Avoid the negative plays. Jalen Milroe has struggled with that all year. He struggled with turning the football over. He had a fumble in this game, and so that continued to plague Alabama. But you it just was one of those games, man. It was a tough dog fight, which I knew it was going to be. I knew it was going to be a battle, and it was just kind of even kill early on. But then Michigan started to just pull away a little bit as far as the momentum. Then they made some mistakes on special teams. A few drop punts hurt them. They missed a special. They missed a special point or an extra point on the special teams. They missed a field goal as well. So that came back to I won't say it came back to bite them because they won, but it did hurt them in the moment in the moment of the game. So special teams, Michigan wasn't looking all that good. Alabama, however, they were looking good on special teams, but the area of concern for them was just the offense and the defense. The defense, and Kirk Herbstreit mentioned this on the broadcast a couple of times. It's like guys just were the assignments were not read correctly. They just weren't reading things correctly. In the defensive backfield, had a lot of miscommunications, get a lot of coverage bust, guys, which has been happening to Alabama all year. And they don't have the best secondary, believe me, I know that. But Terry Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry, your main guys back there, Malachi Moore, the freshman Caleb Downs, out of Georgia here. But it's just that you can tell this is a very young defense. Very young defense. You lose guys like Will Anderson and Brian Branch and those guys to the draft, the NFL. You knew it was going to hurt them. Fedarian Mathis, another name, but they recently throughout from like the Ole Miss game kind of on, the defense started to click a little bit. They started to get better, play better, get after it. But this game was their struggle. A lot of guys are getting wide open. A lot of coverage busts, like I mentioned earlier. Michigan was just kind of just picking apart, their defense and just seeing where throwing different looks at them, throwing different motions and things like that to get them confused. And that's what ended up hurting Alabama in the end. So. Overall thoughts, like I said, Michigan came to play. They played good other than special teams. They played really good football, sound football on both sides of the ball. Guys made plays when they need to make plays. Roman Wilson, Blake Corum, J.J. McCarthy, defensive guys as well. A few of their corners made some excellent plays and coverage on the Bama receivers. Some great tackling, open field tackling. So you have to give credit where credit is due. The Wolverines played good football last night, and now they're going to be playing in the national championship game against Washington. So, shout out to them. Shout out to Michigan on the win there. And they deserved it. As simple as that. And looking for the future for Alabama. I mean, this has been 3 years now since they won a national championship game, and that it's one of the longest droughts they've had under Nick Saban. So they've been in that type of environment and that type of atmosphere in the national championship game, and it's a little concerning for Alabama fans. Seeing this team continue to fall short of what they can do. But at the same time, that these teams are nowhere near as talented as teams that have been here in the past, that have won championships in the past. The 2017 team that came back and beat Georgia was talented. The 2018 team that went to the championship game, they lost to Clemson, but they're really good. The 2020 team, which is probably one of the best teams they've ever had under Saban, if not the best, with Matt Jones and Devontae Smith and Najee Harris and all those guys. Really great team they had there. And makes in those it's times like now that make me miss those Bama teams because they were just so good. They were so dominant on both sides of the football. But this year's team, they had to fight, they had to claw, they had to scrap. I mean, you think about after the Texas game, you're like, man, Alabama's done. A lot of people are like, Alabama's done, Nick Saban's done. This program is just not where it used to be. They're just not good anymore. And then you get to the USF game, and Jalen Milroe doesn't even play. You're starting a lacrosse player at quarterback. I mean, it was an ugly win for them. Alabama got the win, but it was ugly. Then Milroe gets back into the lineup. Nick Saban basically did that. Say, hey, you know what? You guys you want him bench? Fine. I'll bench him and see how we play without him. You see how the offense looks without his starting quarterback, and then he puts Milroe back in, and they continue to just go through the rest of the season, and just survive, man. That's been like the key word for Alabama this year is survival. They've survived some of these games. They came back. They've been resilient. They fought in a lot of these contests, but just no sure dominance like they have had in the past couple of years, And so, yeah, and sometimes being an Alabama fan can make you spoiled. It's almost like being a Chiefs fan, being a Patriots fan. Right? You get spoiled for a certain amount of time, but when your team just doesn't have it anymore, you're just like, what is going on? Because we're just not used to seeing this lack of production, this lack of success that we have seen in years past, and we've seen consistently year after year after year after year, and you just don't see it. So, I mean, they've got one of the best recruiting classes again coming up this year, and this year's team that's coming up, that's coming up next year. You have a lot of guys coming back. Terry Arnold said he's already returning back, as well. So a lot of you guys, Justice Haynes, I'm looking forward to seeing him back as well. He had a few good carries last night. The guy from the running back from Buford, out of Buford High School here in Georgia, and Blessed Trinity High School. So shout out to those two schools. Justice Haynes, shout out to him. But yeah, so I mean, Bama's got some good players in the future. They got Damani Jackson, who transferred over from USC as well. So we'll just see how things come along with Milroe. That's really the only thing. And I would say they need to get another receiver out of the transfer portal, or hopefully one of their guys steps up next year. Some of their guys that they have on that roster step up at the position and can be, because they don't have a true number one guy like they have with Devontae Smith, like they have with Julio Jones and Amari Cooper, those guys back in the day. Jalen Waddle, guys that they know would make plays when they, I mean, Isaiah Bond is good, don't get me wrong, but he's not that guy that's just going to set himself apart, at least not yet, and say, hey, you know what? In these tough situations, you throw to me, I'm getting the first down, I'm getting the catch, I'm getting yards, I'm going to go score, whatever it is. Like, being that dependable guy, being that blanket for the quarterback. Don't have a guy like that. Didn't have a guy like that this year. Didn't really have one like that last year. So they got to get a guy like that. But moving on to the Sugar Bowl with Washington and Texas. Didn't watch too much of the game, but you got to see enough. Michael Penix Jr., I mean, that dude is talented, man. He's talented. He's got a heck of an arm. He is a great quarterback, and Washington's defense, of course, I mean, they've kind of been like in this situation all year. Like, they haven't really blown anybody out. It's always been like 10 points or less games. I mean, games they played in. They played in a lot of close games this year. So the defense is kind of like that bend but don't break, right? We'll bend, we'll give up some stuff, but when it comes to the end of the game, we're not going to just completely fold over. And that happened last night in the Sugar Bowl. Texas was driving, and one of Washington's defensive backs made a great play on the football. It's knocked it away. I believe it was a fourth down. I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, 4th and 11, and they made a huge defensive stop, and the Huskies end up winning the game and head to the national championship. So previewing Michigan and Washington. that's going to be an interesting game for sure. I do think Washington is going to win, but we'll do an official preview closer to the to game day next Monday. But for right now, I'll just give my little few things. I just think that um, you know, for Washington, you keep doing what you've been doing all year. What's gotten you here? Just keep that air raid attack going. Just throw it deep. I mean, Michigan's got some playmakers on that side of football. The defensive line. Hopefully, the O line for Washington will be better than Bama was. Not give up 5 or 6 sacks. But because that D line is physical, they're big, and then they can create pressure. So that's going to be key for Washington. Keep the pressure off of Michael Penix, let him do his thing with his arm, throw the football down the field. They're going to have to be able to run it as well. They got some good running backs on that team, so I would love to see them implement more of the run game also in the game plan against Michigan because they do have holes. You can hit them on the edges. Alabama, that is something I will say Alabama figured out later on in the game. Like we can attack this team on the edge. So they discovered that it's like, what, we can get them on the edge. So Chase McClellan and like I mentioned, Justice Haynes when he was running the ball like them, they were able to find holes on the edge. So if Washington wants to implement that run game, hit Michigan on the outside, on the edges, inside between the tackles, not really the best go because they're a really good interior defensive team. So that wraps us up here for recapping our college football playoff kickoff weekend here, kickoff games with the Sugar Bowl and the Rose Bowl. Of course, like I mentioned, Alabama losing this one 27-20 to Michigan. Michigan will face Washington, who beat Texas 37-31 in the Sugar Bowl in the national championship game next Monday, January 8th, down in Houston, Texas. Make sure you guys tune in for that one. It'll be a fun game. And make sure you guys stay subscribed to the channel if you haven't already. Subscribe and comment your thoughts, your predictions, and we will see you next time on Jay's Fifth Down.